Hi everybody, welcome to Module 11. We are quickly approaching the end of the semester after just kind of going through midterm, and it's feeling very quick to me. This week you're going to find that the module is pretty light, and that's for two reasons. One is that I want to give you time to inventory where you're at with the final paper, which is the second identity paper. And I've made some note in the module about the kinds of things you might be thinking about or be looking for at this point in the semester so that you can plan ahead to hand that paper in as your final on May 3rd. The second reason why this module is very light is to also give you time for your teams to prepare your presentations. The next module, which is Module 12, will begin what I'll call the mini modules that each team will present as I plug them into the module, and they'll go live in Blackboard so that when you click on the links, you're going to see the presentations. And I'm going to give you a feedback form so that not only will you participate in the activities that the team has designed for you or the activity each team has designed for you, but you will also give each team feedback so that they'll get feedback from me, but also peer feedback from you using a Google form. So that's how the last three modules will work, since we've scheduled for you to share your book club presentations during that time. So this week you do have things to watch and to read around neurodiversity as a subject and a continuation and extension of our conversation around ableism, your equality playgrounds and or inclusive classrooms were part of that activity and discussion, and it carries through into what you'll hear more about this week, which tends to be a little bit more around the idea of actually brain and neurodiversity, more specifically than physical ability and disability, so to speak. So we're talking a little more about mental health and cognitive difference. So again, as I mentioned to the folks who did come to our optional meetup, what's always interesting for me about this course is that by the time we get to week 11, which is now, I feel like I haven't covered enough. There's so much I could get into each of these modules and teach an entire class on each topic. And I often feel like I'm running out of time, as I spend 4 weeks always on racism in the beginning, because I feel that's one of the most pressing concerns and open dialogues that most of us will be familiar with to talk about. And again, as I said, most pressing and urgent, in my opinion. But I could teach an entire class just on that focus, right? And I could do a class or more on just talking about issues of class in education. Again, each of these lenses, classism, ableism, issues of sex, gender, race, and identity, are all filtering through our discussion of education. However, the course isn't necessarily about how to teach diversity, equity, inclusion, or in diverse, equitable, and inclusive ways. This is not a lesson plan or methods class. The idea is to have you reflect and also trouble some of your positionality, think more deeply about your own identity, your developing teacher identity, and what that means in relation to issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion in education. Then the hope is that you will apply that kind of thinking to the way you're designing in your methods courses. So again, this is something we talked about on Tuesday afternoon when we met, that folks are starting to think about the kinds of resources they're going to need and the types of materials and ideas depending on the developmental age or grade level you're working in, elementary or secondary, for being a culturally responsive educator. I wish we had more of those classes in this program. I feel like that's something we definitely need, because you only get this one course and it just kind of gets you to question yourself a bit and think more actionably around how those commitments will work for you in your teaching practice. But we don't necessarily show you how to apply this specifically, meaning a culturally responsive or anti-racist teaching lens to lesson plans per se. So something I'm going to do this week with that in mind is to share with you some of the accounts that I follow on social media, because I'm of the belief that right now, especially with the generations that are kind of internet savvy and use the internet as a library and as television and as media and as like the main hub of society, like TikTok is something I would describe in that way, where new ideas are progressing and new cultures are being found and discovered in the way that today's generations, the younger youth folks, are speaking up and purposing social media platforms for education. So you can learn my point there is you can learn as much from following certain accounts on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, or reading things like Slate Magazine or Bust or Bustle, or following Unicorn Riot and finding out what those independent journalists are doing, that as you can if you were to take a class with me, right? I may be a professor with a doctorate, but I am an advocate of the local collective, powerful voices that are right in your neighborhood. You should be learning from the folks who neighbor with you and who school with you and who are familial with you. You should be learning about as much as you can with the internet and what youth activism is doing, and you should also be taking classes at college about these things. So getting your DEI education from many voices and sort of knowledge bases is what I would argue for. And with that being said, there's an amazing amount, and we're lucky to be in a time where there is an amazing amount of resources for any grade level, any topic and developmental range around DEI teaching and learning materials. So if you wanted to learn more about how to talk about gender roles in secondary ed, if you Google those things, you're likely to find a ton of resources and materials to get you going. And then finding an ally team, such as, our class, maybe a pod of you stays in touch, and you check in with each other about how it's going, because what's always missing from those materials is the in-between dialogue stuff that may be needed in thinking through and continuing to reflect on our power roles and positionalities, our understandings of and relationships with our students and their families, and challenging ourselves to go beyond what we were taught, which was to kind of abide by a very Eurocentric, cis, hetero, patriarchal curriculum that is now starting to break apart. So we're in an era where we can kind of push that away and make room for what is new and what is to come in terms of a more inclusive society. So I'm happy for you that you're in this moment of your teaching career, that you're on the cusp of becoming autonomously your own teachers with your own classrooms and your own teacher jobs officially, not just interns. And at such a time when things are so horribly challenging, but yet full of potential. So I realize I've just spoken to you for 8 minutes. So I want to be here for you over the last few weeks. If you want to reach out and talk about these things optionally, we can talk about the instructional piece, the application piece, and where to find resources and how to think more thoughtfully about lesson and unit planning and classroom management, even to some degree, right? The culture of the classroom and how that culminates into the ideas from this class around diversity, equity, and inclusion. I hope everyone's having a great week. I know it's cold out there and not that much fun, but I hope we get some sun over the weekend, and I look forward to your presentations very soon. Have a great weekend.